Hey, welcome back to the shop. This is going to be part 2 of the 16-inch GE fan. I have been... What am I doing here? So the wiring that came out of the motor, there was a little bit of insulation on there, but you know, it was in remarkably bad shape. So what I had done is taken some black RTV sealant. I forget what RTV stands for. But I've taken that sealant and created I've sort of potted these wires that are in here, so that now I can come through and solder onto them and put heat shrink over the top of it and start to build from this point. So anyway, I've done this with 2 or 3 other motors and they've all worked fairly well. So anyway, that still could tack up for a little bit longer, so I'm going to get to work on the housing section here and see how this oscillating section works, because I don't know how this gear this feels like there should be some sort of transmission or linkage here, and I'm going to take it apart and see if we can figure out how it works. Alright, so I've got this came off really nicely. The top section here seems to screw down, and it looks like to me that there's some witness marks there. There's sort of a little wear pattern. You can see that shiny spot. And then the corollary to that is sort of this washer that's in here on this section. So what I would guess at this juncture is that this tightens down. You tighten this knob down and it would sort of engage, if you will, act like a clutch. I have a feeling that when I get this cleaned off, I can't see what that says now, but I feel when I get all that cleaned off, I'll know more about it. So I'm going to pull out some of the chunks of grease that are in here and get this cleaned up, and then we'll see if we can't disassemble this a little further, because I would like to media blast this, and I don't want to the coal slag that's in the media blaster, I don't want to have that get trapped in here and gum up the works. So waiting on the other parts to dry out from being in the parts washer. Now I need to get this plate off of here, and luckily this doesn't usually happen, but there's 2 knockouts here, and the one thing I don't have in this shop is a nail, so I took a fishing hook and cut the end of it off and straightened it out. So hopefully I'll be able to knock these pins out. Hopefully. Hey, I'm not going to show you all the sandblasting, but anyway, we'll show a little bit of it. This you can see here is that dark green color, and I'm sort of on the fence as to what color I want to paint this, because I had gone to Sherwin-Williams and tried to color match this paint and painted the other fan this exact same color. So I think I want to do something that's sort of that low gloss or satinish kind of finish. Also dark, but you know, perhaps maybe a dark blue or like a really, really dark red, almost like a black. I don't know what color you would call that, but anyway. You know, I don't know, I'm open to suggestions too. But anyway, the first step is to get this thing media blasted. So I'll give you a little bit of time lapse of that, just this piece, and then I'll probably leave the rest of the sandblasting out. Alright, so in part one we talked about this plate and how the edges are sort of curled up and rusted and whatnot. And that design, at least in this particular case, I think sort of added to the... Let me see if I can pull you down here. Sort of added to the problem of rust sort of gnawing away at this base here. And you can see these little indentations where the rust was piling up. And then got media blasted away, and then I took it to the wire wheel just to make sure that everything was out of there. So what I'm going to do now is just use some spotting putty, glazing putty, spotting in glazing putty, to fill those gaps in now, knowing full well that there's a strong likelihood that this will end up being covered up later on. But however, if it ends up not being covered up, then you know this is my only real opportunity to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I was looking at the fan blade and it's got this texture on it, which leads me to believe that that is shit, what do they call it? Paint? Anyway, yeah, so that's like paint on there, and I said, well geez, I wonder if this thing, I hope it's not a metal blade. And I took it over to the fiber wheel and touched it real quick, and it's brass. So I got to get the paint off of this. I don't want to use the fiber wheel because the fiber wheel will actually remove a little bit of the metal. I don't want to do that. So I'll put some paint strip around here. Hopefully that'll work. I media blasted this, and now I put some of the... Well, I need to rinse this off. I think it showed that to you already. Anyway, let me rinse that off, and I'll put some paint strip on this and see how that works. Alright, that's pretty funny. They didn't want to clean the brass blades to make them look brass, so they painted them brass. There's a price on there, $15. Alright, well that paint stripper's working. This is the clutch mechanism. We can see now that there is some directions on here. It says in, so that's going to sort of buckle down and tighten up that clutch. But right now I can't disassemble this. I assume that there's something underneath this crud, so I'm going to wire wheel that and we'll see what it looks like when it's cleaned up. Alright, so this has got no indication as to how this thing comes off. It's just, you know, I was hoping there'd be a set screw in there, or on the top there's just nothing. And so these are dissimilar. You know, this is obviously steel and this is obviously brass, so at some point they're joined in here. How, I do not know. So I think right now I'm gonna, you know, not fixate on this, and I'll just clean it up and paint it. I'll just have to tape this section off when I do clean it up. So anyway, alright, welcome back to the shop. This is... Fans, for whatever reason, you know, take up much more space to clean than anything else. I mean, you know, with a hammer or a, you know, set of pliers or something like that, they really don't take up that much space. But fans, you know, just pieces end up everywhere. It's a mess. I used some paint stripper on this and then got a little bit of moisture out there. It's been raining like crazy here, so it's got this flash rust on there. But I need to media blast that. This, you'd seen this get sandblasted, and you know, this is just sitting out in the shop with no protection. I had put the glazing compound on there, and I need to media blast this again or sand it or whatever. But anyway, I've got a lot of cleaning to do. I might include some clips of me polishing the blade on this. I'm not exactly sure how the video is going to shake out yet, but I've got a lot of cleaning to do. I don't want to bore you too much with that. All I would say is that, you know, I'm going to use a mix of the media blaster to clean this stuff up, and then this is just going to be, you know, straight up elbow grease and 3M pads and stuff like that, trying to get that clear. And anyway, I sort of get this under control, and I'll bring you back, and we'll start to, I think maybe the next step will be starting to wire this up. And you know, I'm just going to put this out there ahead of time, so you don't waste your time. This will not be an electrical how-to. This is just what I'm going to do. And, you know, anyway, that's just what it is. So that's your word of caution there as far as the electrical stuff goes. So anyway, let me just get to cleaning. Alright, so I'm going to paint these sections now. I'm going to paint them with this high fill filler sander. And then my plan is to paint it this real dark red. I think this is going to be, I think that'll look sharp, but time will tell. So let me get this out and get it painted. Alright, so if anybody's disassembling one of these fans and they try to get into this mechanism, I can't figure out how this comes out of here. Nothing seems to wants to come apart, and I'm struggling. I've already nicked this thing pretty badly. But what I think I can help you out with is that there's this dog point bit that sits in here like that, and then this appears to be threaded. However, it's just going to hold that dog point in there, and anyway, you just have to back it out and slide this cap out. So I think I'm going to give up on trying to disassemble this whole thing and just reassemble this and paint it as it were. I'm just going to tape all this stuff off and try not to lose this. Well, I'll screw this back in so I don't lose it. Anyway, yeah, not super happy about not being able to disassemble this, but again, I don't want to break anything, so I'm just going to leave it as it were. Alright, sorry for the noise in the background, the air compressor's running, but I'm going to take this to the belt sander and see if I can clean this up a little bit. It's got a lot of little imperfections in there, and I'm pretty sure I can sand those out of here. So that might make it look pretty good. Alright, I am not a soldering or electrical expert in any stretch of the imagination. What I've been doing is just following the trail of what was here when I started. So I've taken the two wires that were not connected and I've just insulated those with some clear shrink tape, so I can discern between, I'm going to use black shrink tape on these. I'm going to solder these together, and then I'm going to slide heat shrink all over these because the insulation is completely shot. And probably, if this editing goes as planned, you will have seen me pot this with some RTV silicone material. So that's gonna keep all these wires separated even though there's no insulation on them, until I get to the point where I can cover them and heat shrink. So alright, so I've got that sort of sanded down. I'm going to have to sand it again later on, so I think that's probably good enough for now. And that glazing compound is pretty neat stuff. I hope it, I haven't used it enough to say that, it works good. It worked on one or two other jobs that I'd used it on, small things. But, I have no background in terms of, like, longevity. But I'm assuming that it's going to work pretty good. There's no reason why it shouldn't. Anyway, so that's sanded down. I'm going to paint this, and when you see this next time, it probably should be that real dark red. Alright, so we're back in the shop. I've painted the fan, and now I'm going to get to the point where I want to assemble it, and not worry about like finish assembling it right now, but I want to make sure that I can get it together and that it functions properly and whatnot. So anyway, that'll be a time lapse of me assembling this. Alright, so I've got the motor back together, discounting like the oscillating mechanism and everything, and I have the switch sort of held in this machinist vise, and I've got it set on medium, and I have it temporarily wired up to a 2-wire switch, and then these are just, bare connections hanging on out there. So, and I've got my cord here, so I'm completely isolated from everything. I'm not touching the bench. Everything's on, ready to go. Only thing I've got is these two insulated things, so there we are. Again, I keep doing this. I should do this in the beginning, but just so you know, you can see that flapping around now. So anyway, it sounds really good. I've got a little bit of oil in there in the journals right now, and anyway, I'm real happy with that, so I'm going to continue cleaning the bolts up. Those are back here in this little pile, and then finish hardwiring this thing with good proper terminals and everything like that. So the ferrule that screws onto the back of the wire, for the strain relief, there's not enough meat there to get into there. So what I'm going to do is epoxy this in place so that it cannot come out. And that's not ideal. I would like the ferrule to go on there, but it's just, there's no possible way for that really to happen. So this is my solution. I'm not happy about it as you are, but you know, it's what it is. So, but that should hold it. But anyway, nothing really to learn here other than, and I've shown this before, but this is a trick that I stole from 357 Magdad, which he said he stole from someone else. I would like to credit the person that came up with it, but seeing that I do not know who that is, I'm just going to credit 357. So we got to start somewhere. So, but anyway, this is a super handy trick. I was always using all sorts of other stuff, but a little bit of blue tape on the workbench. It's super handy. I'm going to try to find something else to glue while I got this going. And but anyway, that should hold that strain relief on there pretty well. All right, I know this workbench is driving half of you people wild out there. Anyway, fans are just hard to work on. It's, you know, and to try to cram everything in so I can get the shot. Anyway, so second verse, same as the first. When I plug this in before, I'm testing it out before I go through all the motions of assembling it. I want to make sure it works. So I've got it wired up short of the new ground here. That will go in when I bolt the whole housing in. But I've got it in a middle speed. I've got my motor over here. I've got everything set up, and I'm isolated from the bench, so and I can plug it on, and you can see that my motor works now. So anyway, I'm happy. Everything seems to be functioning fine, so I'm going to give the epoxy a little time to set up, and I'm going to assemble this thing, and I should be pretty close to getting this thing done. Alright, so here's my failed bluing attempt. I just went ahead and hit those with some black spray paint. So this is just such a treat. These old fans are just so cool. I put the oiler in there. I've got the thing pretty much assembled. The clutch, you know, just the worked before. Anyway, you back the clutch out, and then it'll stay wherever you want it, but then you screw it in, and then that's the actuating. So, you know, just what a treat. This is a lot of fun. The one thing that I have to do now is finish the blade. I've been putting it off, and it's just such a hot mess. Let me get it, and I'll show you what I'm dealing with. Alright, so I had hit this with the paint stripper and got, you know, some of it off of there, but then it dried up, so now I've got to strip it off again and get it cleaned up. But I've got a lot of polishing to do on this, so let me go ahead and get going on that. So I'm still trying to make some progress on this fan, and it's much tougher than I'd anticipated. The Scotch-Brite and the Brasso work okay. The the pneumatic wheel and the fiber thing sort of, you know, it didn't really get me where I needed to be, so I took this back over to the bench grinder, the buffer, and tried buffing it out, but and that worked, but only after I went over the surface with this 800 grit, this 800 grit pad on one of the squishy discs, and that little squishy disc sort of worked okay. And I think what it did is it sort of got down some of the really high bad spots. There's like, I don't know if it's left from the paint or some sort of corrosion or whatever on there, but the buffer wasn't touching that stuff until I sort of knocked it down lightly with this 800 grit, and then the buffer sort of was able to take most of it away. But you can see here that I still have a long way to go with this section, so I'm just going to keep cleaning it up. I wish there was some shortcut or some sort of secret trick that I could tell you, but you know, this is just a lot of work. So a buffer and, you know, elbow grease, I guess. I am just absolutely struggling with this fan. Now this section here, you can see I've got a pretty good shine on it. I guess one of my problems is I'm fixating at it and I'm looking at it from 2 inches away. But I think, you know, all in all, that's probably a pretty decent shine. And I think one of the things that I forgot that I had, and one of the viewers had mentioned it, and I apologize. You know, I don't know if it was Bill or anyway, somebody mentioned that when they were in the service, they used to use this Neverdull stuff, and you know, it's very interesting because I wasn't sure what to expect, and it's this sort of wadding, if you will, and it's got some sort of a compound in it. I don't know anything about it, but it seems to be doing a great job. I've got a used piece here, but you know, as you rub, it starts to generate its own sort of cutting fluid, if you will, and it'll eventually start polishing and turning black, and you can see that, if that's zoomed in enough, that it started to pick up this material, because this was, you know, clean as clean could be, because I cleaned it off with the parts washer and then even brake parts cleaner, just to make sure I wasn't picking up some sort of residual. And this is actually cutting through and doing a good job of polishing this. So I think that perhaps the Neverdull is good for touching up brass that's already pretty clean, if you're just doing some maintenance cleaning. But I don't think that if this thing was in the, like, initially it's super rough stages, even after I got the paint off, this would, you know, this is finishing compound as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, it seems to be doing a good job. I'm going to keep going through and finish this thing off, and then that'll be the end of the polishing. So, alright, there it is with the coat of the paste wax on it. And you see yourself there. But anyway, I think that's going to be good enough. Anyway, that's enough for tonight. I'm going to get her assembled tomorrow and we'll be done. So Alright, so this thing had run for a couple of hours and was fine, and then stopped working. And, you know, this whole rat's nest of everything that I'd gotten into here, I was terrified to get further into it, so I used the RTV sealant to try to separate it. You know, it did work for a little while. However, you know, with the 4 or 5 hours of oscillating, it ended up having enough, you know, movement or whatever that something went awry here. And anyway, now that sort of gave me the forced my hand, and now I had to dig into this further. And look, I can see that this wire is actually, you know, just pigtails. There's 4 wires. This is really dirty, so it's hard to see, but I'll try to show you as best I can. Now, we talked about the 4 wires, but only 2 being used, so I've got 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So what I really need to do is just cut this off here, these taps. I'm going to try to salvage as much wire as I can here. Pull this old wire out, run some new wire in, and rewire this motor and see if that fixes it. So this is pretty small detail work, so I'm going to bring it back when I'm done. Alright, so I pulled that wire out and ran new wires all the way back into these 2 taps, and then sort of just pigtailed them out the front here. So this gave me nice new supple wires that I can connect to. Hopefully this fixes my problem. Alright, so I've got that wired back up. Let me get it assembled and see if it works. There we are. That noise is the tape hitting the shroud. Anyway, yeah, that fixed it. Okay. I'm super happy about that. Alright, so I'm going to call that a win. The new wires, you know, I just was scared to dive into that motor far enough, but luckily it did break and sort of forced my hand, and I think we've got a really solid fix this time. So anyway, I'm real happy with this fan, so thanks for watching. Have a good day.